Joining us now, Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, nice to see you this morning, and thank you for coming on the program at a time where we are told the President is working on this shutdown standoff on an hour-by-hour basis. What can you tell us has changed in recent hours?
He is. I've spoken with the President, and Sandra, he has said that he's ready to receive a counteroffer from the Democrats. It's been many, many days since the House passed its $5.6 billion for border security. It's not restricted to just a wall. It's what CPB says they need. They need technological enhancements, physical barriers, the steel slats the President has tweeted about and talked about from the Oval and elsewhere. It's just that border security is national security, and we have a flood of drugs coming into this country and into our communities. We have obviously an increase in gang members coming over. You saw just what happened to Officer Singh in California, God rest his soul, murdered by a criminal alien who had come back into this country, should not have been here in California, a sanctuary state or in a sanctuary city. And this is somebody who, we've got 31 sanctuary cities, 6 sanctuary states. You've got people who want to make us an entire sanctuary country. We just need Democrats to come to the table and be honest with themselves and who they've been in the recent past. 39 Democrats this past year voted for some kind of physical barriers and border security enhancements, and this summer 10 of them on a committee voted for DHS funding.
Before you go on there, I want to dig into 2 things that you just said. The President's waiting on Democrats to respond, and we know that he tweeted about that. He said waiting on Democrats to come on over and make a deal. What we're hearing from Democrats is the President's not reaching out to us. So there's a lot of blame being thrown around. Has the President directly contacted Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer in recent days? Has he reached out specifically to any Democrats?
The President has made very clear that the House passed the package, and then what happened here is what always happens, Sandra, is that the Senate then received it. And it is with them. They can counteroffer, they can sign the $5.6 billion, which is a modest investment in our nation's security. When you think of the $800 billion they spent on a stimulus package in the last administration, any sundry list of items that they fund to the billions of dollars, $4 trillion budget or so, we should have it $5 billion for border security. It's just a modest investment. And by the way, Democrats themselves have been for secure fences. They've been for border security. They've been for enhancements. I prefer Chuck Schumer 2006 and 2009 to Chuck Schumer 2018 and 19, where he has amnesia about how he voted for the Secure Fences Act, how he said enhanced border security is a good way to keep out illegal immigration. So we have to be honest about the flood of drugs and crime and gangs that are coming over. That's not everybody. That's not most people. But we do know from the DHS statistics that a number of women are saying they're being assaulted. The number of people saying they're being assaulted, women saying they're being sexually assaulted, is up. The number of children and family units that CPB, our Customs and Border Patrol, are being asked to absorb is overwhelming the system. We have the Flores decision from the courts, and we have the Congress that fails to close the loophole. They can close the loophole and not close the border.
Kellyanne, it sounds even like talking to you right now that there's room for compromise on the part of President Trump when I hear language from you rather than Wall talking about a fence or other border measures. John Kelly was just interviewed by the LA Times and made a bit of news saying this on the wall. It's not a wall, he said. The President still says wall. Oftentimes, frankly, he'll say barrier or fencing. Now he's tended towards steel slats, but we left a solid concrete wall early on in the administration when we asked people what they needed and where they needed it. And furthermore, on this back and forth, this was Mick Mulvaney, the President's acting chief of staff, on Friday on that issue.
The Democrats have simply shut down the discussions. They did not even counter us. We went back to them, by the way, after their second $1.3 billion and picked a number less than 5. So we actually came off of our $5 billion slightly. They, instead of coming up from their $1.3 billion, left town.
So perhaps you can use this as a message to Democrats. Where is the President willing to give on these issues? Is it on a dollar amount? Is he willing to come off that $5 billion? Is it simply in the language and the wording of the wall or the fence?
Well, it is a silly semantic argument because people who just want to say wall, wall, wall want it to be a 4-letter word and not respect what Customs and Border Patrol and ICE tell us they need, which is enhancements at the border. There may be a wall in some places, there may be steel slats, there may be technological enhancements. And so, but always saying wall or no wall is being very disingenuous and turning a complete blind eye to what is a crisis at the border when it comes to the drugs pouring in. You know, all the fentanyl that ICE interdicted last year, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in this country, didn't walk over the border by itself. The gang members who are coming in, the folks who are coming in, the criminal aliens, because the Democrats voted against Kate's law, Sanctuary Cities law, they voted against the removal of criminal aliens law. Now they're not coming to the table of border security. I believe the president is already compromised. He originally asked for $25 billion. The House is at 5.6. Right. They did their job. The Senate has to come back. It's a modest investment. And by the way, when we're talking about CPB and ICE, if some of the Democrats had their way, the more left-wing ones, we wouldn't have ICE and we wouldn't have CPB. We wouldn't have the folks who rescued 4,300 people in the last year. You hear about the tragic deaths of these migrant children. You don't hear about the over 4,000 individuals who were rescued by CPB.
And we know the president has been tweeting about that as well, pointing fingers at Democrats for what is happening at the border and the loss of those two children.
This needs to be a bipartisan issue. It needs to be a nonpartisan issue with a bipartisan solution. Border security and national security is everyone's business, and it is dismaying to watch a number of these Democratic senators who, instead of coming to the table and talking about border security for this nation, Sandra, running in 2020.
So the
big
standoff
story about them
continues.
this weekend is they're talking about 2020.
Clearly, based on
the
this
president's
discussion,
talking about 2018.
Good time to thank all of our servicemen and women, and we'll do that this morning. And Kellyanne Conway,
God bless them.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Thanks for joining us, and good to speak with you.
Thank you. Happy, healthy New Year.
And to you as well.
We want to bring in now the incoming acting White House Chief of Staff and Director of the OMB, Mick Mulvaney. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, all. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Mr. Mulvaney, why did this happen? And what's going to be done to make sure it never happens again?
Yeah, that is just a heartbreaking story, but I think in a very, very difficult and painful way, it sort of illustrates exactly the very best of our immigration and the very worst, and why legal immigration is so important and wonderful for this country, and illegal immigration is so different. And one of the reasons that the president is still here fighting for border security. There's too many of those stories. They need to stop, and border security would be one thing we could do to help accomplish that.
How closely is the president following this story? I know that news is still developing.
Yeah, we actually talked about it with him late last night. The president's been here, by the way, all weekend, all Christmas. He's staying in Washington, D.C. over New Year's. He's canceled his plans for Christmas. Now he's canceled his plans for New Year's. So we're talking on an hourly basis about not only what's happening in California, but also what's not happening in Washington, D.C. with Senate Democrats. So the president is very heavily engaged in this on almost a minute-by-minute basis.
Absolutely. And we are following it on a minute-by-minute basis as well. But this conversation about illegal immigration, about the wall, is front and center there in Washington, whether the Democrats are there or not to cut a deal with. Yeah. President tweeted this just moments ago, and we want to get your reaction to it. He said, "We will be forced to close the southern border entirely if the obstructionist Democrats do not give us the money to finish the wall and also change the ridiculous immigration laws that our country is saddled with." Hard to believe there was a Congress and president who once approved. He said he'll close it all down because of these ridiculous immigration laws. Is he willing to go that far?
I think he is, and I think he's just trying to draw light to the fact that this is a crazy discussion to be having. All of Chuck Schumer voted for border security in 2006. He voted for it again, I think, in 2011. It seems like Democrats really like border security when there's a Democrat in office and don't like it when Donald Trump is in office. And I think what the president is trying to do, and rightly so, is shed some light on what's happening here. In all fairness, I think that having worked with the vice president, I met with Leader Schumer last Saturday, the last time we sat down face to face, and my gut was that he was really interested in doing a deal and coming to some sort of compromise. But the more we're hearing this week is that it's Nancy Pelosi who's preventing that from happening.
Well, Mick, let's put up this headline from Politico right now to show where she is. It says Dems' New Year's resolution, stiff Trump on the wall and reopen the government. How is it you intend to get any progress with positions like that?
Well, I'll tell you where we are, and then we'll talk about progress. The Democrats offered us $1.3 billion for border security, but the border barrier. Keep in mind, everybody agrees at this point. Some folks use the term wall, and they mean different things. Everyone agrees that what we can and should be building on that southern border is that steel barrier that the president tweeted out. That's what he wants to build. The Democrats, believe it or not, don't call that a wall. They know that we have the ability to do that, and that would be a functional barrier. So everybody's okay with design. They offered us $1.3 billion to do that. We countered with $5 billion. They came back at walking away from the table. The Democrats have simply shut down the discussions. They did not even counter us. We went back to them, by the way, after their second $1.3 billion and picked a number less than 5. So we actually came off of our $5 billion slightly. They, instead of coming up from their $1.3 billion, left town. And I think that speaks a lot about what's happening in Washington, D.C. again.
Is there any negotiation going on behind the scenes right now? Are phone calls being made? Or any kind of movement at all? Or they just left town and that's it?
No, they left town, and I think the reason they did is because Nancy Pelosi, in fairness, does not have the votes for the speakership yet. She cannot be seen by her